Yes, thank you for organizing this event, and I'm very pleased to be able to present a bit the area of work that I've been focusing on this last few years. So I'm a regulations expert in Europe, especially in the specific category. I've worked for the Federal Office of Civil Aviation in Switzerland, and since this summer, I work as a consultant also for different companies that wish to operate in the specific category for different sorts of use cases, but mostly dealing with drones heavier than 25 kilograms and complex use cases. And I think one very interesting use case has taken place in the last few years, and that I've also supported while my work at the FOCA is drones used in winemaking, and that's also what I'm going to present today. So maybe as a first thing, to also get some sort of background for those of you which are not necessarily familiar with the European framework. Since the beginning of this year, there is a new regulation applicable in Europe, which divides the drone operations in three categories. So we have the open category, which deals with low-weight drones in visual line of sight, below 120 meters and far away from people, or at least not over people. As soon as you breach those limitations, you're going to operate in the specific category. So there is plenty of use cases in the specific category, and this category covers a lot of different operations, from the drone delivery to load transport to operations over people, etc. And then whenever you do very, very risky things like transporting people or transporting dangerous goods, you will be in the certified category, which already has regulated manned aviation. In this context, and very early already, the drones have appeared to be helpful in the winemaking. In winemaking, there is a certain issue related to fungal diseases, which are actually, especially in humid conditions, are attacking the grapes and affect really strongly the yield of winemakers. In this context, and since already years, winemakers have been protecting those grapes using pesticides, which are sometimes a bit controversial. But overall, they are using pesticides to protect the grapes, and they usually apply them using an atomizer, which is usually a tank, which is usually attached in the back of the winemaker, and linked to a gun that will spread the pesticides. Usually this happens, and it's very spread through the countries in Europe. So it's done quite a lot like that. It's not only in Switzerland the case; it's also in Italy, or in Germany, in France, and Portugal. So this is a very commonly used method to spread pesticides. And overall, it's very complicated to do so whenever you need to apply pesticides on a very steep slope. As you can see on the picture here on the right, sometimes you have vineyards which are on steep slopes, which are particularly good because they are very well exposed to the sun. Sometimes, it's very convenient to have vineyards on steep slopes, but it's also very effortful for a winemaker to climb up there. and spread pesticides with an atomizer and a tank on his back. So there, the drone is obviously the ideal tool to solve this issue. Because you can do that remotely, you are not exposed to the substance because you are remote. It's easy to reach those steep slopes, even in areas where it's complex to get. So it's really the ideal partner to really resolve this issue. And we have seen in Switzerland very early already those kinds of application emerging. It has been possible since now a few years to have several drones operations to cover this use case and to really help winemakers in this process, which is usually taking place between May and August, to really spread every 3-4 weeks pesticides on the vineyards. From a regulatory perspective, so in the very beginning, there was the question to be able to scale, to have scalable operations and to be able to do that safely. Obviously, the aviation authorities have been very pragmatic because they noticed from a risk perspective, the risk profile is very low because you fly at a very low altitude. And usually over these vineyards, you have nearly no one. So these have probably pushed also the aviation authorities to be very pragmatic and also to discuss with the other authorities, which are also involved, which are more in charge of agriculture, to also be, to find a pragmatic way to have those operations taking place. Obviously, it's very helpful, and everyone had the incentive to find a right procedure and a simplified procedure to really have those operations taking place. So we use the SORA, which is quite a well-known methodology now, and we try to generalize it for those operations at very low altitude in order to cover those operations. There was, from an agricultural perspective, there was also a bit of a questioning because usually those operations fall within aerial operations for pesticides, and those operations in Europe are actually banned. This is historically due to the fact that pesticides, as I said before, are very controversial, and especially the drift of pesticides is very well regulated. And helicopters that used to be used for this use case have a really high drift for those substances, and it's not really appropriate anymore with the current regulations to use an helicopter. This was banned in the EU due to the pesticides directive, and is now heavily questions whether this should be somehow a bit amended for drones also to be able to do those operations in the rest of Europe. I will come back to that later on. Of course, for that we need standards, we need a way to measure the drift of the drones, to measure that the drift is comparable or lower than what you have with an atomizer gun. And of course, the personnel needs to be formed for spraying pesticides and have the necessary knowledge about that. Yeah, the overall results was very interesting. So it was quite successful to have some sort of generalized regulatory framework for those operations, and many companies are now applying pesticides during spring and summer using drones. I think it's about 20 companies, and it's growing every year, which are actually using those drones for pesticides applications. What we see is, with the increasing requirements also coming from IASA, we see a professionalization in this area also, people being probably more systematically trained and more systematically dealing with drones. with procedures, maintenance, and other aspects kicking in. While in the very beginning, the SOA framework left quite some space for interpretation and for also different sorts of structures, and was very flexible. Now it's being maybe a bit more prescriptive. Yeah, the application has been extended to other cultures. So the winemaking is, of course, the perfect example because of those steep slopes, which are hard to reach. But the drones bring also certain advantages in cultures like strawberries or apricots. Yeah, so it's very interesting to see that emerging in Europe. Yeah, overall in Switzerland, on this ban of pesticides for aerial spray, we have some sort of special a special situation because we did not apply this pesticides directive, and we have helicopters already used for those use cases, but in a very limited manner. But the tests with drones and the commercial operations with drones has also incentivized other countries like France or Germany or now Portugal or others to also evaluate this mean to apply pesticides, because it's obviously much more convenient for winemakers. Yes, there are still a lot of limitations. So I presented the good side of these applications, but obviously, well, it's still very limited by, on one side, the payload, which depends. Now, if you use DJI or IO41 drones, you have 17 liters, 20 liters tanks. Now, with the DJI T30, you have 30 liters, and with the T40, you will have 40 liters. But it's still very, yeah, it's a small payload for what you actually need. So you need to fill the tank quite a lot. And the autonomy obviously is also a very limiting factor. So the largest drones, so the T30 or T40, have an autonomy between 6 and 10 minutes, which is very low. And yeah, so as I said before, so this restriction in Europe with regard to pesticides is a bit hindering also the development of this technology, but maybe in the long term there will be amendments with regard to that, there will be standards with regard to that, and then it would be possible also to spray pesticides in the rest of Europe. And what we see also is the problem with aerial spraying is obviously you spray from the top, and the grapes are actually in the lower region of the vineyards. So it's not always the best way to expose the grapes to the pesticides. And so spraying from the top is not the best quality of application, which is why it's currently, the drone is more used currently to complement applications of pesticides from the ground. So the winemaker still needs to climb up once or twice during the spraying season to complement the application by drone. But it's still much more convenient than climbing up every 3 weeks between May and August. So for a lot of winemakers, it has been a convenient solution. Yes, so I mentioned the limitations. Here you see a picture of the T30, which has, so this the latest DJI drone, which sprays laterally. Yeah, I'm not paid by DJI, and I don't want to do any publicity here neither. So it's just to show a bit the innovation also, that lateral spraying is a topic, and that it can also increase the quality of application because you might be able to reach the lower grapes. Obviously, the autonomy is a big topic, as I said before, and now people are also looking into hydrogen or other sources of energy in order to extend the autonomy of those drones. Larger drones, yeah, I guess that's always a topic also. And yeah, I know that the Directorate General in Brussels, which is in charge of pesticides, is also looking also into amending this directive. Yes, I was a bit long, but I guess that's more or less it. I don't know if there is any questions.
Hi,
Thank you, sir, for your.
Ravi Kumar. Is there any camera you are using to identify where to spray the pesticide?
Usually this is not done like that. So the grape region is actually, so they need to identify where are the grapes lines, right? But this is done in very different ways depending on the companies. Some use aerial photography to do that. Some others use 3D models, which are coming from certain sources, which already exist in Europe. Yeah, so there is plenty of different ways to do that. But I don't think they are using cameras to identify where are the grapes. But you could use, of course, cameras to identify whether the disease is spreading or not. And this could be also very helpful to give certain information.
Okay. And do you have any aerial view, like for suppose if the drone is used to spray in one location, and what is the chance that the drone will go to the same location again?
I'm not sure I understood the question. So do you mean if it's going to the same location again?
Yeah. Assume that it is already spray into that location, the pesticide.
Yeah.
But after the next day again it went to the same location. Do you have any algorithm which can guide the drone to which can go to the next location next day, like that?
This very much depends on the manufacturer. So I cannot give any information on how the manufacturers are doing that, but I guess Aero 41 or DJI or XAG all have software algorithm which allow also to identify where you need to spray. And obviously the winemaker usually knows which lines and which fields he has already sprayed and when he will do it again. This is usually an operation which is repeated, like I said, every few weeks. There is a new application to spray those pesticides. But again, this is very manufacturer specific, I guess.
Okay, thank you.
Do we have more questions from the audience?
Yes, sir. I have a question. Hello.
Yes, I'm hearing you.
Yeah. So as you said, the drones go for spraying. So doesn't the thrust of the drone affect the delicate grape like fruit in the very early stage?
So you mean the downwash or you mean the
Right,
thrust?
the downwash and the thrust, both.
So the downwash affects the spray, yeah, but that's usually a good thing because, as I said before, due to this vertical spraying from the top, it's very hard to reach really the grape region. So the downwash actually helps having a more uniform spraying and also reaching the grape region. So this is rather helpful in this context. On the thrust, I don't think it affects the spraying, but yeah, well, it affects the downwash, so yeah.